A long time ago, people believed maggots just appeared on rotting meat. Even scientists of the time period thought this to be true. This was their theory of spontaneous generation, where living things come from non-living things. Francesco Redi was a scientist in Italy in the year 1668. He made an observation that there were flies flying around the meat. Maybe there was something more to the maggots forming on meat. He decided to test this idea of spontaneous generation. Redi used the steps of the scientific method. He stated his hypothesis, or an educated guess, based on his observation. Maggots did not spontaneously appear from rotting meat, but rather from eggs laid by the flies. Those eggs hatch into maggots. To test his hypothesis, Redi set up an experiment. He put meat in 2 jars. One jar was completely open on the top. The other jar was covered with cheesecloth. After a day or two of the jars sitting out, Redi observed flies landing on the open jar. No flies could get into the covered jar with the cheesecloth. Redi also added a 3rd jar that was closed with a cork stopper. No flies flew above that jar, and no flies got into the jar either. And here were Redi's results. Maggots only appeared on the meat in the open jar. The covered meat had no maggots at all. And the one with the cheesecloth covering it, even though there were flies buzzing around, no maggots formed on the meat. However, maggots were actually on the top of the cheesecloth. Redi's conclusion? He showed that maggots come from flies, not from the meat itself. This may all seem so silly to you, but back in 1668, scientists had no idea that maggots were basically baby flies. Today, we know this to be true. For the last and final step of the scientific method, he needed to share his results with the scientific community. He kept a notebook of his observations and the setup of his experiment. Here is an illustration he drew in his notebook, showing maggots are baby flies hatching from the eggs the flies lay. We can thank Francesco Redi for disproving the theory of spontaneous generation by using all of the steps of the scientific method. Do you think you can create an experiment to test your hypothesis and use all of the steps of the scientific method? Let's try.